Okay, this video is for those of you out there who have a 914 who have experienced issues with a vapor lock. The way this usually happens is you drive the car when it's warm, and if you shut it off and you start it right up, everything's fine. But say you go into a restaurant, the car's warmed up, and you go into a restaurant for about 30 minutes or so, and you come back out. So the car's had plenty of time for the heat to sink in. Put the key in the ignition, turn it over, and the car sounds like this. Alright, we know that's awful, and the car won't start up, and it does all the sputtering and crap. Well, what I did with my car is this summer I decided that I was going to change out the plastic fuel lines. Everybody that's got one of these knows that they use the plastic fuel line through the tunnel and then from the pump back up, and those lines get kind of hot. There's a line that used to go across the engine here. Now what this does is when you park the car, obviously the lines are full of fuel over the engine's hot, and then they sit there and boils the fuel inside the lines, putting like air bubbles in the lines, and it's hard to get pressure, and the injectors squirt air bubbles and your car doesn't run good. Now, the theory behind moving the car to, or the fuel pump to the front of the car, is that you're taking, well, the way this works actually is, the way the fuel pump works and stuff is that it draws fuel from the tank, pushes it through the filter and stuff into the engine area, through the injector rails and stuff, around the engine and back to the fuel pump again. So it just recirculates that fuel there. So the theory behind putting the fuel pump in the car up by the tank is that it will have more fuel in the lines that it can push around and maybe move that hot fuel out. In other words, it can take and transfer the fuel from that's now existing in the tunnel all the way around to the engine and back up towards the front. So you have cooler fuel at the back. I don't really think that's necessary. What I did this summer was I changed my fuel lines out. I took the plastic fuel lines out and I put in stainless steel fuel lines. Now what I did is when I ran the stainless steel fuel lines into the trunk area, or into the engine area, see if I can move this around to where you can see it. What I did is I took fuel line, rubber fuel line, and just took a length of that and put it right over the stainless steel. So the heat, any heat in here would have to get through this rubber line before it can even get to the stainless line. Therefore, it's going to keep these stainless lines a little cooler. I also found that once it entered the fuel rail down here, you can't hardly see it, but there's a fuel rail down here that covers the injectors. It came out of the fuel rail, which would be this hose, ran across the engine by the distributor, by the coil, and down underneath and right across the block of the engine to the fuel rail on the other side. Well, that hose is going to pick up all that heat. Plus, it's just not a great place to put it near a spark. So what I did with mine is I took my fuel, and instead of feeding it across the engine this way, I came out of my injector and I fed it across the back of the engine. Went down to Home Depot and got some cable clamps. These are readily available, insulated. They use them a lot for air conditioning lines. Used a self-trapping screw, put 2 clamps in, so I go into the fuel rail on the other side, back out of the fuel rail, through the pressure regulator, back across the back of the engine again, back into the return lines, down to the fuel pump, and around. So it really hasn't changed anything. I haven't had to move my fuel pump anywhere, but I have more insulation around the fuel lines, and I keep them away from all the heat. Now, I'm not going to say this is the absolute fix for this problem, but I can tell you that I did this the end of summer. I did this in August, I believe. I did this in August. This is September. I've taken it out and driven it. I've been on trips up to Idlewild and back, which was probably an hour and 20 minutes, and that's up in the mountains and then back down. I've been on trips, you know, to local areas, you know, having dinner and stuff. And when I've come out, I haven't noticed that stumbling problem any longer. So I won't say that this is an absolute fix, but it's definitely improved the issue. So, you know, without moving the fuel pump. So that is my tip for today. Try a little bit of insulation over your fuel lines, especially if you can replace to the stainless steel fuel lines in the back. Reroute that hose that was across the engine, and it seems to have worked very well for me. That's all I got for today. Thanks.